Good day, I'm Russell Eastaugh from Regan Van Roy, the African tax lead, and Regan Van Roy, a boutique tax specialist firm in Africa. So today I'm going to talk, as part of a series on African tax issues, I'm going to talk about exchange control, which the astute amongst you will realize is not a tax issue at all, but it obviously has ramifications for tax, and somebody's got to take an interest in it. So it often lands up at least somewhere involved with the tax professionals. And also because it has such a big impact on a lot of what we do anyway. Now, I'm of an age where I can remember exchange controls in the UK. So I'm not sure that's an advantage or disadvantage, but it's just how it is. Those were abolished, I think it was 1979 in the main part, but unfortunately in Africa, they're still there. And this does seem to come as a matter of surprise to some people when they're investing in Africa. So best thing is do your research and find out what they are. Do they apply in the country? And if so, how, and how rigid and how enforced? And what are the rules on getting money out of the country or even getting money into the country? I think that's one of the points I would say is, don't forget, it's not just all about getting your money out. You have to lay the groundwork at the beginning. So when you invest in a country, what are the requirements? Do you have to notify the central bank or somebody on its behalf to say you've invested? And if so, what kind of investment it is? Do they have to prove it if it's a loan? And those sort of things. And does it have to go in a particular exchange rate or routed through a particular way? And there can be problems if it's not cash, for example. If you've got a in-kind equity investment, for example, or bills paid offshore on behalf of a company in the country with exchange controls. Now, a fair question would be, well, what countries have exchange controls? It's probably easy to say which ones don't. Most countries in sub-Saharan Africa do have. There's a couple who don't. So, and there are varying degrees of complexity. Kenya, Uganda, they don't have. Zambia doesn't have at the moment. Botswana doesn't seem to have. Mauritius hasn't. But an awful lot of the rest have. In fact, most of them to some other extent. So, investing in a country, as I said earlier, you have issues with what documentation do you need, what permissions do you need, etc. If you're investing out of a country, can it even be done? Is there a special rule like there would be in South Africa? You have a set of dispensations where you can invest certain amounts in different types of country and different kinds of investment. Other countries may not be so advanced and may say, no, you must go and seek special approval for everything, or no, you just can't have the money. Another possibility. Lending to a country, yes, there's normally going to be rules about how long for, what interest rate, what currency, how are you going to repay it? And then if you're lending from a country, again, do you need special approval and permission? And how easy is that to get? The obvious ones then would be, what other effects could these controls have? And it can then be, well, I want to get my money out of the country. How easy is that? And if you're lucky, it'll be answered by how well you documented the investment in the first place. So for Nigeria, for example, did you have a certificate of capital importation for the equity you bought or for the loan you made? If so, you should be able to take out the coupon, the dividends or the interest, as it were, and the repayment of the loan or sale of the shares. If you didn't get that initial founding document, then you've probably got a problem. Other countries, it can be different. But if it's something more exotic, you may have different issues where there can be particular problems, can be with royalties or other payments for IP or management services, where there may be additional agencies to go through to get permission, but there's a Ghana Investment Promotion Commission, for example, in Ghana, or the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion, NOTAP, in Nigeria, which can be very difficult. And they may just turn around and say, no, you can't do it, which is a problem. But be ready for it, and then try and think if there's any other way around doing the transaction. So paying for goods and services, often a problem. It got better in South Africa recently. If they now do allow connected party loans, they do allow connected party services, but those rules, then they want to make sure you're following the transfer pricing rules, which you have to do from a tax point of view anyway. So those are some of the obvious issues that will come up with it. Now, what other problems can arise? Even without exchange control, you may have a more simple one. Is there any money? Is there any access to foreign currency? Otherwise, you suddenly find, well, you're allowed it, but you can't find it. And that's probably something worth knowing in advance, if at all possible. Unfortunately, circumstances change, and what might have been all right one day suddenly turns out to be a shortage the next. But try to work out what that might be. In some ways, you might be better off not letting balances build up too much in a country, but finding out how to get your money out more regularly. At least be thinking about that. One of the things I find is an interaction with transfer pricing, in that, what do you do with a case where you say you must have a loan at arm's length, and you know what the arm's length rate of interest is, a base rate plus a margin, and then you suddenly look at the exchange control and say, well, you can have the base rate, but you can't have the margin. Now, most countries on the lending side would recognise you can't get blood from a stone. If you're not allowed it, you can't receive it. But it can cause problems with them saying, well, you should have earned this much and we didn't. So again, work out in advance how you're going to deal with that mismatch. So, and an overall advice would be plan ahead, do some research, understand the rules, keep a track on how they change, and then adhere to them, because often the penalties for non-adherence to exchange control can be quite severe. And follow the news on what's changing. I mean, nasty little change coming in Nigeria, where people rely on the parallel market, the unofficial exchange market, for certain transactions, is they'll say there's proposed tax law now saying your deductions will be limited to the foreign currency amount converted to local currency at the official rate, not the unofficial rate. And secondly, then to impose an excise duty 100% of the difference, which is going to raise the cost of a lot of foreign currency transactions quite dramatically, depending on how big the spread is between the two rates. So a lot to keep a track of, but somebody's got to do it. And often I find it's the tax people who are best prepared and best placed to at least bring the warnings up of what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, and make sure somebody's then going off to look into it, even if it's not finally done by the tax person. At least they've done their job then of alerting management to the issue. Thank you for listening, and please be in touch if we can try to help you. Cheerio.